go the extra mile and strategize what you'd like the path to look like. And don't get too hung up in the like, oh, but what if it's not exactly what it needs to be today and I don't like it tomorrow? Just start somewhere. Start trying to plan out what that path could look like. Lean into your personality and the things that your fans like about you and give it a shot. You can change it later.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 352, and today we're going to be talking about keeping the attention of your fans with creative marketing that will make them absolutely love what you're doing. And I'm so excited for this episode. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me, as always, is Circa. Circa, what's going on, dude?
Not much, dude. Just got off my shift.
I love the shirt.
I'm in a new house and life's good, and happy Black Friday. Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, for sure. This has been an exciting couple of weeks on all fronts. If you're listening in and you're not watching on YouTube, if you don't know, you can listen to Creative Juice and watch Creative Juice over on our YouTube channel at Full Stack Creative. But if you're listening, Circa is wearing a 7-Eleven employee shirt right now. It's a beautiful red and black polo. He's looking fresh. He's looking excited, and I think stoked to talk about creative music marketing today.
Let's go, dude. Super psyched.
So we've spent the last few episodes resetting foundations a bit, right? And we've talked about the 3 levers of growth for what your marketing should be doing for you. And we've talked about that in previous episodes where we've talked about creating attention, capturing attention, and monetizing attention. Today, we're going to go into the realm of keeping your fans' attention. Once you have it, how do you keep it? What do you send them through? How do you get them engaged in what you're doing? And I think this is going to be a really fun episode because, in my opinion, this is where you can really shine as an artist or as a band in getting creative about your marketing. You get to lean into your quirks and your personality as an artist, into the things that your fans really dig about you and the reason that they probably liked you to begin with after they first heard you or checked you out for the very first time. So this is really fun. I think we're going to have a good discussion here today about different tactical ways and examples of programming a path for your fans once they come into your world.
For sure. Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, like, we've had a nice little run on this topic. We tried to, and this happens every couple of years. We try, on the podcast, we've pretty much gone through everything like there is to go through. And then we just start repeating ourselves. And it's like, well, let's really repeat ourselves. Let's start back from ground zero. Let's start from a beginner's perspective. And then also it gives us a chance to kind of refresh our philosophy, because our thinking on things changes throughout the years, and things we thought before we may no longer think, or, it might have changed. And so we've been kind of doing that reset over the last 4 or 5 episodes. And we're coming up to the end of what I would consider a proper reset, where we're giving sort of our baseline framework, our base philosophy on music marketing, music business for independent artists, not necessarily for your major label regime. And so it's been a really great series of episodes, but now we're getting close to the end here. And I'm very excited to kind of wrap it up and deliver these final death blows.
Yeah, me too. And this is a good one because, like I kind of alluded to here, I think when artists hear us talk about marketing as like a creative extension of what you do, I think the idea of world building is where the scales kind of fall off your eyes and you're like, oh yeah, all right, I get it. I can be really creative here. I can take my online presence and it's kind of like a clean canvas that I can paint however I want it to, and I can lead my fans down a path, at least once you start thinking within the framework that we're going to present today. This is the keeping attention lever of your music marketing. And we talked about this on the 3 levers episode, which we'll link to in the show notes. If you didn't listen to it, you can listen back. But we talked about this and kind of teased out this idea of building a program for your fans, right? Programming a path. And I wanted to spend some time today talking about great examples of this tactically that you can use and sort of where they fit into what you might be working on, because maybe you were listening to that episode, or maybe you're hearing this idea for the first time and you're like, well, what the hell do you mean build a program? Like, are you talking about coding something? Do I need a special set of software? Where does this fall into whatever else I'm doing? How does this fall into my content? Where does this fall into like email marketing or text marketing or the ads that I run? How does it influence the things that I write online? Where does it all come into play? And so I think it would be helpful for us to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this and give some good examples of stuff that we've seen in the wild, stuff that we've worked on at the agency, and stuff outside of music as well, that I think will be helpful and kind of give you guys some ideas to work with here. And the first one that I want to kick off with is, maybe it's helpful to just set the frame, right? When we talk about programming a path, what I want you to think about is like when someone discovers you for the very first time, and then maybe they go over to your Instagram profile or your TikTok or your Facebook or your YouTube or your website, wherever they might go next, wherever they land after they decide, I like this and I'm going to go a step further to try and figure out what this artist is about. Wherever they land, this is where the programming starts of, where do you want fans to go next? What step do you want them to take next with you? And how do you make that cool and creative? And I wanted to lead off with this example that I think will hit home for some people. You probably visit plenty of artists or bands' social media. I imagine a lot of you love music like we do. And if I go to any random sampling of artist accounts online, I'm probably going to find their link in their bio, right? I'm going to see a link. It's probably not going to have a whole lot of context surrounding it. It might just be sitting there hoping that I click on it. Maybe it will say like, stream my new single, or new single out now, with some arrow emojis pointing down at the link. But that's usually about all that I get. And the question that I want to pose here, and then the sort of alternative scenario that we can explore, is that the next place that you really want to be leading someone who probably just discovered you from hearing you or seeing you perform for the first time online? And the alternative scenario that Circa and I get presented a lot, or historically have been presented a lot, is we get exposed to a lot of like coaching or business opportunity type accounts online. If I scrolled my newsfeed right now on Instagram, for example, I'd get a lot of reels that are about growing your business, because that's a lot of what I spend my time studying. There's a lot of that, or finance, things like that. And when you visit, we'll call them coaching, right? Consulting, coaching companies. When you visit those kinds of profiles, the things that I see are more like a call to action. When I get to a profile and there's a link in the bio, it's usually a call to action that's like, get my blueprint here. Check out this system that I built that you can have for free. And there's a clear sort of positioning of, here's something that I have that you might be interested in that you can click and get over on this link in my bio. And there's a clear path for me to take to go do something. And I think that those two opposing ideas are how we can start this conversation about programming and how you might think differently about it.
Yeah, my favorite, and maybe this is trite and obvious for people who listen to this podcast, maybe I've said it a million times to you, but my favorite example of this is when I discover a new show that I like. If it's released serially, like if it's a new episode comes out every week, it's not all bingeable, then the immediate thing I want to know is what day does it come out? So I know which evening in the week I get to watch the new episode. That's understanding the program. And really the only bit of information I need is what time on what day of the week does it come out. And so it behooves like any showrunner to make sure that in the edit of the show, there is always that trail of breadcrumbs so that I can begin to follow the program. I can get plugged in. And the more breadcrumbs you have, the more obvious it is from a cursory glance at what you're doing to know when I should show up, where I should show up, and what I'm going to get. That is super important. That's like the kind of gateway to a nurturing path. And so what's really great about that is if, let's say you are kitted out with breadcrumbs, like I cannot look at your online presence without getting some information about how I can get more content or how I can get the next thing. If it's blanketed with that, then what you're free to do is take any pathway to get attention. It doesn't matter what you do to get attention, because you know for sure that if someone takes a second glance, they're going to see the program. They're going to get tapped in. And that's one of the benefits that the 502s had. Former co-host of this podcast before I came back on, Ed Isola of the 502s, when the 502s, his band, went viral on TikTok, one of the main things that benefited them was they had a deep infrastructure. So when you went to the 502s.com, the first thing you saw was, hey, it was their album launch campaign that had now turned evergreen. So the album came out a year ago or a year or more by the time they went viral. But when you went to their website, the first thing you saw was sign up now, you're going to get this and this.
Yep.
And what an album launch campaign does really well, it like fully indoctrinates you into their world. So all you got to do is sign up. And by the end of that, you're going to be a 502s fan. And that's so good. It's so good to be able to just spray attention at all of your channels and know that you have this net that's going to catch all of that attention, convert it into nurtured attention, and then monetize it even. The album launch monetizes on the back end. So that's one example of having like a really great net, a great, signage on your digital ecosystem, your digital presence, so that no matter where you get exposure, no matter if you get mentioned on television or you're a contestant on The Voice, or you have you open for a big artist in your city, no matter where people find out about you, the Google searches, the searches on Instagram and TikTok, they're all going to deliver them to the same place where they have a high probability of catching you for the long term. That's really what it is. Because you're not going to get, let's say that you get on a TV show randomly and your artist name is mentioned, people are going to search you. 90% of those people will never do thing two with you. They're just going to find out about you and then they're going to go away. The point is, do you have enough digital signage? Do you have enough of a presence and a pathway online that you're going to capture that 10%? So keeping attention, the first thing it's about is that capture. It's making sure there's enough places on your digital presence, on your online presence, that give people the next step, those breadcrumbs. So sprinkling breadcrumbs all around your online presence, that's like step one of keeping attention.
Yeah, I like the phrase you use, digital signage, right? You're putting billboards up all along your online presence in as many places as you can, pointing them to the next thing that they should be doing with you. And that next thing you can get really creative with. It doesn't have to be an album launch. Here's a really good example from a client at the agency. Their next step that they program fans through is get my 3 favorite videos that I've ever created. Just text me at this number and I'm going to send you my 3 favorites, my top picks. And they get so many signups this way. And that's a text opt-in. So I say that to say, the path that you take them on can be creative. The mechanism by which you take them there, it could be text, it could be email. There's tons of ways that you can do it. And what's funny is if you watch this in the wild, that's not really what you see. What you typically see, and what I would encourage you to avoid, is text me for updates with a phone number. Go the extra mile and strategize what you'd like the path to look like. And don't get too hung up in the oh, but what if it's not exactly what it needs to be today and I don't like it tomorrow? Just start somewhere. Start trying to plan out what that path could look like. Lean into your personality and the things that your fans like about you and give it a shot. You can change it later. It's all good.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And so that's not we didn't just go over everything that you need to do to keep attention. We can consider this as getting attention, the parts of it that immediately precede getting attention. That's what that is. It's the breadcrumbs. If you have enough of those breadcrumbs, then none of your getting attention efforts will be wasted, really. So I'd say that before you start going to try to get new attention, in a massive effort, I think the first step of any new indie artist starting out is you have to kind of prove to yourself that you can get attention, and you have to develop the skill of getting attention. So we talked in the last episode in this series about that, right? We talked about, getting your skills up in terms of creating content, releasing consistently, modeling the content of other successful creators. But once you're there, and you're okay, now I'm ready to pour gas on the fire. I'm ready to do ads. I feel really confident about my ability to create great short form vertical videos. I feel like I can build a large social following. Before you go full regalia on that too far, it can be helpful to have those breadcrumbs sprinkled around. But that's not the only part of keeping attention. Keeping attention is also about what are the activities that you do with your new friends when you make new friends. When you make these new friends, what is it that fills up your friendship? It can't just be, you think I'm a good guy, that's why we're friends. It has to be, we do things together. Activities. You need to have room for activities. So that's why, the breadcrumbs thing, that's only really the first part of it. It's a great, if you remember in Sonic the Hedgehog, when you run past that little light pole, yeah, it would turn blue or turn red from blue, I forget which, but that saved your checkpoint. So if you died from there, you go back to here. A great checkpoint in your music marketing, in your music business, in any business, is having these breadcrumbs that take viral moments or great opportunities to get attention and convert them into attention you keep.
For sure. Yeah. Now, kind of transitioning into talking about activities that you do with your fans. This is kind of like the second piece of keeping attention, right? The breadcrumbs are just part one, like you said, Cirque. A couple examples that I'd like to give you guys that I think are helpful to think about here. A great onboarding series, whether that be in email or text. What happens when somebody takes that step and they sign up? Take the example that I mentioned from one of our agency clients of their greatest or their top favorite picks, their videos. What happens in email for them or in text for them is those videos get dripped out over a few days, along with introductory content that kind of gets the fans used to hearing from the artist. And that's the doing stuff together. It's like, hey, you're going to hear from me. This is what you can expect. I promise it's going to be cool. It's not going to be lame. I'm not going to spam you. I'm going to give you exactly what you signed up for here. And I promise it's going to be way cooler than you ever could have expected. And that can happen, again, over email. That can happen over text. That's just one sort of example. The 502's example of sending their album for free. It's songs from the record with behind the scenes content and sort of experiences over a number of days. That can work really well. Another example from the agency, one of our agency clients has a membership, and this is kind of like a little bit deeper in the keeping attention, but when fans sign up for their membership, what happens is they go through an onboarding series of email that introduces them to every piece of the membership, and it frames them to think about it as like, hey, this is everything you're going to get. I want to make sure that you get to take full advantage of what it is that you're experiencing. And that's kind of the big idea here, is you're giving fans the ideas that they need to continue the journey forward with you. You're kind of lighting the path. You've got the flashlight, you're standing in front and being like, hey, I'm going to show you the way. This is going to be really cool. Let's go into it together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's helpful to sort of compartmentalize the different places where you'll need to keep attention. So we talked about the breadcrumbs and like keeping it from the first glance, but there's also keeping it before you get a reliable way to speak with your fans. So when we get attention, we're converting absolute strangers into like, hey, they know about you. Okay. Then when we get them to sort of plug into something on social where they see your link in bio and they know to come back for new music every week or whatever it is, whatever the program is, until they are part of that owned media, they're on your email list, they're very easy to lose. If they stop paying attention, if something happens in their life where they're just like, I don't have time for this right now, or they just forget and like they remember a year later, like, oh yeah, I was watching your stuff. If you lose them there, you're not going to get them back.
Yeah.
And it used to be the case that like it was a lot easier to get them back because we could retarget them, but retargeting is not what it used to be. So it's a very crucial spot where you haven't really locked them down as a fan yet. Anything could happen and they could totally stop paying attention and stop visiting your page at any moment. In that moment, it's helpful to have an ecosystem of content, a world to dive in. And so that's kind of the next place. Once we've kitted out digital signage across your whole online presence so that people at least know there is a program to follow once they learn who you are, then it's about, okay, yes, they go to your Instagram, they see your link in bio, they know, they get some digital signage, they know that you're going to do X every Y frequency. But then let's say that they're hanging around, they're looking for more stuff to consume. What is that library, that backlog of publicly available, not paywalled, not opt-in walled content that's really going to keep their attention for at least the next, half hour if they're in the mood to browse around what you got going on, much less if they come back, what's going to keep their attention. So that's what having a backlog of content is really helpful for. Luckily, if you followed what we said in the previous episode where we talked about getting attention, you're going to go through a period that's going to equip you with a large backlog of content. So they'll have a lot to go through, a lot to binge, which will bring them ever closer to becoming owned media, becoming someone who you can contact no matter what, whenever you want, and you're not reliant on them self-identifying, self-subscribing to, your publicly available content. And what I want to make absolutely clear that I'm not using too much jargon here, right? If I find out who you are, I go to your Instagram, I understand the cadence at which you release because you got those breadcrumbs there, and then I binge your content. It's about what's going to keep me there and keep me engaged and actually teach me more about you and get me more involved in what you're doing and realize I really like what you're doing until I sign up for your email list or I sign up for your text list or I make a purchase. Those are all three things that would keep me in your world no matter what. But until you get one of those things, you can lose me at any moment. So we want some sticky mechanisms that are going to keep me engaged. And so that's the next part of nurturing, the next part of keeping attention.
Yeah, this is pretty critical advice, I think, because I think there's a little bit of a misconception out there about the cadence of your releases and how you create content. I think there's this sense of like, you do this to please the Spotify algorithm so that it goes in your favor. And sure, that's part of it. Sure, you do it so that you get your reps in making music and making your music better. Sure, you do it to get attention. Yes, that is very important. However, what it really does for you and what the cadence does for you over time is it allows you to build up this backlog, this library, your Netflix, so that as fans discover you, they have a lot of stuff to go check out. I experience this all the time with YouTube channels that I discover, with podcasts that I like, with artists that I dig. That's the real reason behind this. I think there's a misconception around like, oh, it's for algorithm. No, it's for people. We're doing this for people.
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of difficult to overstate how important it is. It's like if you have nothing there, you have no backlog of content. There's 3 posts on your Instagram and there's no breadcrumbs. So if I discover you on Instagram because I see a piece of your content that gets thrown in my newsfeed, and then I go to your profile and there's just nothing to really keep me there and there's no information, you're going to lose me. I'm never going to see you again. That's just the reality of the sort of disposable content regime that we find ourselves in.
Well, it reveals to you, or it makes the fan think that you're not doing anything interesting. That's the struggle, really, is that somebody goes to your profile and it's a ghost town and you're like, oh, well, this person's not really active. I don't really think they're up to anything. I guess there's no point in me really following. Sure, I like the video. The song sounded cool, but all right, on to the next thing in my life.
Yeah. And it's not personal, right? It's just no. There's literally we're in the attention economy. You've never had more competition for people's attention. And so that's why you need to have a sort of sticky online presence. You need to be able to keep attention there. So we talked about having those breadcrumbs, digital signage, whether I go to your Instagram, your TikTok, your website, anywhere I encounter you, I should be able to know, when do I come back and what am I coming back for? What gets released, what is made available, and when, on what cadence. If I know that, then I'm much more likely to come back. So we talked about those breadcrumbs. We talked about when I make that first visit to your Instagram or your TikTok or your website, what is there to entertain me? Not only entertain me, to keep me there longer and create a memory that I can recall later, but also to teach me more about you. And you can consider this like the friendship, where it's like, if we don't have a nice conversation after I meet you at a party, you're forgetful. You're forgettable, right?
Yeah.
You're forgettable. I totally could forget you. But if we have a long conversation, I learn about you and I actually find that I identify with you on certain things, I'm much more likely to remember you. So that's why it's important to have that engaging experience for people. And that's really denominated in having prior stuff for people to dive into music, but also video. Okay. And even lore, like even stuff to read, even articles, like those can be helpful. Then there's a whole other part of keeping attention, which is once you do own the media, once I have subscribed to you, why am I still your friend?
Yeah.
What do we do together? Like, what cool stuff do you have that keeps me, you got to think about it as it's a, what have you done for me lately kind of environment, right? Like, it's like, what am I measuring up when you come to ask me to participate in your next launch, to buy your next album, to buy your next piece of clothing, to support your music career next? What is it that we've been doing together since the last time that I did that's going to make me go like, of course I'm going to do that, right? That's what you need to have in place. So there's really three components of this keeping attention. There's the digital signage, the breadcrumbs. There is the first glance sort of bingeable content, a world to dive in, terminology, culture, imagery, things that like your fans will know by heart that's unique to your world.
Yeah. The stuff that makes you.
Right. And for the misfits, right? It's like the skull, right? It's the coffin box set. It is like all the B movie stuff. It's literally the history of the band members is a very like in-group knowledge thing about the misfits. Every band has this. It has culture. What's going to onboard me to that culture? So we talked about the breadcrumbs. This is the like onboarding to the culture, the getting to know you phase that you need to have publicly available, not behind a paywall, not behind an email opt-in, just publicly available so that when I discover you, I'm much more likely to become indoctrinated to your culture. And then lastly, we have the activities you do with the people who are in your world, who have signed up, who have purchased something. How do you not forget about them? How do you make actually their experience more special than anyone outside?
Yeah. And I think the answer to that question, to put it really simply, no jargon, no worries about tech or anything like that. I'm not going to tell you what email marketing platform to use. I'm not going to tell you which tech service to use. The answer to that question is to tell your fans stories, to keep them in the loop with what you're doing, and to figure out a cadence by which you do that, whether it's weekly, every 2 weeks, every day. Man, I get texts from Gary V every 2 days. Gary Vaynerchuk, if you don't know who he is, he's a marketer and a business person. I get texts from him every single day. I don't read them all, but I get them every day. Sometimes they make me smile. And these are the kind of things that you program in to keep your fans with you. And you tell stories and you don't overstuff them into one big long text or one big long email newsletter. Break them out. Let the stories tell themselves rather than being like, oh, let me just give you my monthly update of everything that I just did. No, don't do that. Talk to people like they're with you on the journey.
Yeah, I would say it's smarter to approach this third bucket we were talking about in terms of keeping attention, where you need stuff that's exclusive to the people who are supporting your music career, who are on your email list, who are making purchases. You need exclusive stuff for them. You need to treat them better than anyone else. And the way that I think is really smart to do that, the way that you can make it not too much a burden on your career, is if you just allocate. It's a budgeting concern. When I go into the studio to record 3 or 4 new songs, I always carve out one that no one gets publicly. I always carve out one for just the email subscribers. When I go to create new short form videos or music videos or whatever, I always carve out one for the people who have made purchases. I always carve one out for my customers. Picking every area where you create and saying 10% or 5% goes to just the customers or just the email subscribers. That's a great way to over time always have something for them. What it also does is it builds up the value of crossing that chasm.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, as an email subscriber, I do get all these songs that don't get released. But also, if I'm not an email subscriber yet, the more that you do this, the bigger bundle of songs that have never been heard before by anyone who's not on your email list, I get the second I sign up. The more compelling it becomes to make that first purchase, because I get unleashed the entire history of that budgeting you've been doing. It's a great savings account. It's like a great way to sort of build up the pressure at those big gaps, signing up for the email list or texts and then making the purchase. If I know, and it's great because it's a built-in bonus to any purchase. If you have like 20 songs that only customers ever get to hear, only if you've done something to support my music career, do I release this stuff to you. And I usually release a new one every month or so or whatever. Like, it's such a huge thing to be able to say for any product you're trying to sell. Also, if you haven't bought yet, you get all this for the first time when you purchase this $10, $20 item. Such a huge motivator. So yeah, I think a budgeting approach is best.
Dude, yeah, and every artist I know, myself included, has songs on the hard drive graveyard that could become that within seconds, Like, that's the crazy thing. Like, I think budgeting when you're creating is a great ongoing approach to take, 100%. But if you're overwhelmed with starting and maybe you're not in a creation cycle, then I would encourage you to look back at what you might already have that you're just not thinking about, or you're thinking wouldn't be valuable to people. Because over time, as you grow and as more people come into your world, it will become more valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that covers kind of all the different keeping attention buckets you need to worry about. You need that digital signage. You need a rich ecosystem before I subscribe, before I purchase, so that I have like a conversation I can have with you. I can understand, why do I like you? Like, how much do I like your stuff? What do I agree with you on? Like, what culture can I now participate in? I need to get on board. I need to get on the program. So you have that bucket, and then you have the, why am I continuing to be a customer or an email subscriber? What's in it for me? Those are all the keeping attention buckets you need to worry about, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. This was a fun exploration and hopefully gave you guys some hard examples from stuff that we've seen in the wild, outside of music, inside of music, clients of ours, to give you some ideas of ways that you can lean into who you are, and hopefully gives you a little bit of a new, fresh way of thinking about how you can be creative in your marketing. Because really, I think this is where you get to do a lot of that. Not that it's not everywhere else, but this is the place where it's most clearly seen, where it's like, oh man, I can just be me in this, and I can let my fans like truly explore who I am as an artist, and I can lead them to that. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope you guys dug this. We'll continue this arc next week on Creative Juice, so we'll see you guys soon. Peace.
Feel the East Coast, feel the West Coast, feel me. Say what?